What do you think Vladimir Zelenskyy was doing this weekend? Oh, my goodness. I can't imagine he slept well on Friday, Saturday, or even last night. After the absolute tongue lashing he got in the Oval Office on Friday, which, of course, became the biggest conversation in the entire world over the weekend. And as I look back, and we've had a couple of days to think back to what happened on Friday, to me, this all began the moment Zelenskyy showed up to the White House. You can agree or you can disagree with this all you want. That's fine. But you got to know what you're walking into in any negotiation. Heck, any conversation with a boss, with a client, with a colleague, you've got to have some idea what you're walking into and what makes that person tick. And if there's anything we know about Donald Trump, we know what makes him tick. You show up, you be deferential, especially when you need something from him, right? You do the little song and dance with Donald Trump. Oh, Mr. President, oh my gosh, this is the greatest ever. You're just the best. You do all those things, whether you like it or not, if you need something from the guy. If you have to extract something from Donald Trump, you kill him with kindness. You kill him with pleasantries, especially when the cameras are rolling. And when Zelenskyy started to get a little bit combative with Donald Trump in that Oval Office on Friday afternoon, it was all downhill. That right there was the opening for Donald Trump. For somebody who feels like Zelenskyy has not been grateful to the United States, who feels like the United States has dumped way too much money into that country for its defense, and frankly, with somebody who's not exactly inclined to continue to do it with no end in sight. And right there, it was kind of that match that just lit the entire thing on fire in front of the entire world on Friday. That's what happened. But it started earlier than that. It started when Zelenskyy showed up to the White House. And listen, he's been showing up to anywhere in public in his getup. And his getup is meant to be a definition of war. His getup is meant to be something that when he looks back on it, and the people look back on it, and the world looks back on Ukraine, they say, that's a country that is currently at war. That's why he wears his getup. And that's fine. That's admirable. But what is Trump like? Trump's old school. Trump likes to see a guy show up to the White House in a suit. Zelenskyy didn't do it. And that was mistake number one. And you could tell the second that Zelenskyy got out of that SUV on Friday afternoon, Trump was already demeaning the guy.
He's all dressed up today.
President Trump, what's your message to Vladimir Putin, sir? President Trump.
He looks at Zelenskyy and he says he's all dressed up today. That was the first thing he said to Vladimir Zelenskyy when he got to the White House. Now, is that the nicest thing to say? No, not really. It's not. Sorry. It's just
such a nice man.
No, it's not. It's not the nicest thing to say. But sometimes you say things about people and to people that tell you and tell others how you really feel about them. And it's clear that Donald Trump does not have a high level of regard for Vladimir Zelenskyy. And that only went downhill as the day went on. And then, of course, you had the Oval Office meeting where they basically came to blows in front of the entire world. Now, you look back on what exactly that means going forward. Well, I think what's going to happen here is Trump's going to end up getting the minerals deal that he wants. Zelenskyy basically wanted full-blown protection from the United States and any kind of deal with Russia. And that's not how we go about our business. Trump is also very frustrated with the fact that he believes Europe has not stepped up like we have stepped up. And he's right. He's absolutely right about that. Trump has long had it in his mind that the European nations are ripping us off all over the world. And the Ukraine war is just one example of that. We have been incredibly generous to Ukraine. And we should be generous to Ukraine because fighting off Putin is an important thing to do on the world stage. Pushing back on Putin, not letting Putin take whatever he wants, is an important thing to do on the world stage. And we have been very generous on that front. But like anything else in life, at some point, when you have an off-ramp, you've got to take it. There's no way that Ukraine is beating Russia in this war. It's just not happening. Population-wise, they're about a fourth of the size, if that. They're hemorrhaging troops right now. Now, Russia's not in great shape either. So it makes sense to get this thing done, get it over with, end it, end the slaughter, end the killing, and move on. And know that you've got a weakened Putin in Russia. That's a good thing. Sure, he's going to get a couple of things that he wants, but you preserve Ukraine, the country, you preserve its people, and you move on and focus on the things that matter right now on the world stage, which, frankly, is China on a much larger scale. They are far, far, far more concerning to the American interests than Ukraine-Russia right now. And it's not even close. And that's where all of our focus has to be. I know you've seen all the pictures on Facebook of, people showing their allegiance for Ukraine. They don't care about Ukraine. It's all about Trump. Please stop with that. I don't want to hear it anymore. That, yes, we all defend Ukraine over Russia. But wanting to have a nuanced conversation about this and say, when does it end? How much money do we have to pour in to prove we're anti-Putin and pro-Ukraine if it just results in the death and slaughter of thousands and thousands of people? What's the benefit? You can't find one. And I thought that Marco Rubio, who went on ABC This Week with George Snuffleupagus yesterday, put it very well.
Let me tell you. All right. So do you know what the United Nations resolution was? I'll tell you if you want to hear what it was. It basically said this has been a horrible war. It's time for it to end. The job of the UN is to bring about peace in the world. I thought that's what the UN was created to do, to stop wars and to prevent them. And that's what the resolution did. Was it antagonistic towards the Russians? No. Back to the point. But it also didn't praise the Russians. All it said is, this is a bad war. It needs to end. And by the way, at the Security Council, which has not been widely reported, the first resolution on Ukraine that has passed the Security Council in 3 years passed this week because of the leadership of President Trump. And it's a resolution that says, bad war needs to end. Let's bring the two sides together. That's what the resolution is. Again, what is the United Nations for? Isn't it not a forum to promote peace in the world?
And then there was this part from Marco Rubio on ABC this week.
Shouldn't we all be happy that we have a president who's trying to stop wars and prevent them instead of start them? And I just don't get it. I really don't, other than the fact that it's Donald J. Trump. If this was a Democrat that was doing this, everyone would be saying, well, he's on his way to the Nobel Peace Prize. This is absurd. We are trying to end a war. You cannot end a war unless both sides come to the table, starting with the Russians. And that is the point the president has made. And we have to do whatever we can to try to bring them to the table to see if it's even possible. I'm not promising you it's possible. I'm not telling you it's 90% likely. I'm saying it's 0% likely if we don't get them to a negotiating table. And the sooner everyone grows up around here and figures out that this is a bad war that's heading in a bad direction with death and destruction and all kinds of dangers surrounding it that could spiral into a broader conflict, the sooner people grow up and realize that, I think the more progress we're going to be able to make. But the president's crystal clear. He campaigned on it, and he's going to govern on it. And that is, he is going to be a president that tries to achieve peace, and he has been very clear this is a war that would have never happened had Donald Trump been in the White House, and it needs to end, and we're going to do everything we can to end it in an enduring and sustainable and fair way.
Marco Rubio with Snuffleupagus on ABC This Week yesterday. That was, I thought, very well said by the Secretary of State, who has come a long way from just a few years ago to make salient points like that to legacy media. And what you are seeing right now is Zelenskyy likely come back to the table this week, sign that deal, and put his nation in a place that puts this war finally to an end. And here's the other thing. If Trump does get his way and allow the United States to get involved with this minerals deal, and also allow the United States to have some role when it comes to rebuilding Ukraine, there will be a natural backstop when it comes to America having interests in Ukraine. That's going to happen. If the rest of the world decides to invest in rebuilding Ukraine, that will be a deterrent to Russia for a lot of economic reasons. And that's something that I think Zelenskyy lost sight of when he came to the White House last week. This is not about being a Putin stooge or a Russia stooge. Everyone understands what Vladimir Putin is all about. One of the most evil men on the planet, if not the most evil man on the planet. He's right up there with the worst of them. But Vladimir Putin can be a really bad guy, while at the same time Zelenskyy can show up at the White House and understand that he does not hold any cards in this situation anymore. We have dumped hundreds of billions of dollars into his side of the war. Europe has done less than half of that. And if you want to rely on the EU, please be my guest. But you know what I know, that's a fool's errand. It's all going to work out. I mean, I had people text me, World War III's coming on Friday. No, it's not. We've lived through a term of Donald Trump already. We know the bombastic nature. We understand how the guy negotiates. And that's in large part exactly what we are seeing right now on this front. This is it. 913-408-7957 is how you join us on the phones and also on the text line on KCMO Talk Radio. Pete, Zelenskyy does not want the war to end. He loses all power when it ends. See, I don't think that. I don't believe that. I think Zelenskyy has gotten to the point where and I can't imagine being the leader of a country during wartime. But I think the guy is partially to the point where he says, we can't lose this thing. He's almost too proud. And I can respect the guy who's led his nation in wartime, who feels incredible pride for taking back every single inch of the country that he has lost. I can respect that. But it's like in life, someone's got to then straighten you out and say, with all due respect, that's not happening right now. You don't have the manpower, you don't have the equipment, you don't have the tools to make it happen. I don't think it's just this desire to be in power forever. I know some of you will disagree with that, but I don't see that going on here with Zelenskyy. But I do think when you're in war for 3 years like the guy has been, you're at the point where you're saying, we are not giving up anything, no way, no how. And while I respect that, when you realize that you actually have no power to achieve any of that without somebody else's help, you've got to see the world the way it is right now. And that's what he needed a reality check on Friday, and I'm guessing he got that over the weekend. Pete Mundo on 95.7 FM, KCMO Talk Radio, 913-408-7957. Back here in Kansas, one of the U.S. senators had himself a doozy of a town hall with protesters. We'll show the audio coming up on KCMO. Well, the weekend was also not great for Roger Marshall, Kansas U.S. Senator, who found himself at a town hall out in Oakley. Oakley is off of I-70, two counties over from the Colorado border.
I've stopped there one time for gas.
So did my brother-in-law. He visited us when he drove from California, and he stopped and spent the night in Oakley. And he's like, yeah, that was different. You know, he's been in California most of his adult life, so that was a totally new cultural opportunity for him is how I would describe it.
I feel like that's what people not from Kansas think all of Kansas is like. It's not true, but that's what. Yeah.
Yes. I would totally agree with that assessment. It has a lot more in common with my old stomping grounds in northwest Oklahoma than it does anything in the Kansas City metro, to your point there, Mark. Classic, small western Kansas town. You're right about that. So Roger Marshall's out there, town hall. I would say it looked like it was about 75 people inside the town hall. And they're shouting them down, and they're very upset about potential veterans losing their jobs due to DOGE. And Roger Marshall ended up walking out early. Here's what it sounded like.
Is doing right now as far as cutting out those jobs, a huge percentage of those people, and I know you care about the veterans, are veterans.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And that is a damn shame.
Yes. Yeah.
That is a damn shame. Yes.
I'm not a Democrat, but I'm worried about the veterans, man.
Well, I yielded to one of my elders, and I appreciate his comments. I think it's a great. We don't have time for everyone to stand up. I do got 2 more commitments today. Appreciate everybody making the drive out, and God bless America. Thank you. with you, buddy, right?
We're going to vote you out. What did the guy say right before that?
He's like, hey, we wanted to get pictures with you.
Yeah, what? Flipping the middle finger while you take a selfie with the guy? Come on. Nobody there was a Roger Marshall supporter. So this is now the most recent example. We saw Mark Alford deal with this last week on the Missouri side. We've seen this all over the country, and they look carefully coordinated. Oakley, Kansas, is in Logan County. They had a total of about 1,300 voters in the 2024 election in the entire county, most of that coming from Oakley. 85% of that county voted for Donald Trump. There are only 183 people in the entire county who voted for Kamala Harris. Now, maybe all 183 of them showed up to the town hall on Saturday. I suppose that's possible. But this whole thing just stinks to high heaven. It's supposed to drive a media narrative that the American people, the independent voter, is turning on the Trump administration's attempt to clean up fraud, waste, and abuse and create a leaner federal government courtesy of Doge. And I don't believe it's going to work. And Roger Marshall's a guy who will meet with a lot of people and do town halls. And guess what? There's a lot of politicians that do not do it. And when he saw what was happening, he said, you know what? It's fine. I get most of these people are still probably my constituents, but I understand what's going on here. And it was pretty evident what was going on there. I love how the camera pans to a guy who says, you know, I'm not a Democrat, but I'm worried about the veterans. Boy, that was a perfectly timed comment, was it not? The notion being all these independent voters or Republican voters suddenly are upset with Doge. You know, Trump ran on this. Now, you cannot like it, but you can't say you didn't know that some of this was going to be happening. Now, maybe it's happening faster and quicker and maybe not in the perfect way that some of you would have imagined. But this is not like news to anybody who is following the election. And when you want to talk about long-term sustainability of the country, and you want to talk about getting America back to a place where, I mean, in a perfect world, you're not running $2 trillion annual deficits. You're not $36 trillion in debt. It's not going to happen overnight. It can't get fixed overnight, but you've got to create a leaner federal government, and that's what's going on here. And the notion that Oakley, Kansas has turned on Roger Marshall, please spare me. 913-408-7957. We'll get to you and also one thing that the president might be missing the moment on next on KCMO. So, of course, you know, you have national media picking up on this Roger Marshall town hall story over the weekend where he showed up in Oakley, Kansas, which voted for Donald Trump 85% to 13% for Kamala Harris. And the other 2 was like for RFK. Headline here, rawstory.com. Watch angry scene as GOP senator booed for fleeing town hall early in blood red states. Oh, my gosh.
How dare you?
Blood red state.
Right?
I'm going to vote you out.
Yeah, 75 people out in Oakley, Kansas. And what you're seeing now is a carefully coordinated effort to make it seem like everybody is turning on the idea of creating a more efficient federal government. On the text line, Pete, I've been getting dumb videos on social media about Trump cutting the VA and other veterans' benefits. They say it's part of the new cuts, but I never see any facts tied to it. Don't worry about the facts. Now, I will say this as well, and this might be controversial. I don't think it should be. But if someone who is a veteran loses their job with the federal government due to Doge, I mean, with all due respect, while we have a tremendous amount of respect for men and women who serve this country, it doesn't mean that you just have a forever job after that from the federal government. I mean, depending obviously on how long you serve, you do get a pension from the American taxpayer, which I think is well-deserved based on what our veterans go through. And the fact that they do put their lives on the line on behalf of their country, I think that's incredibly admirable. And if you spend enough time doing that, a pension is well-deserved. But I don't know why suddenly it means that you're just supposed to have a job forever from the federal government if that job does not bring value back to the taxpayer. That doesn't make any sense to me. And I don't think that's controversial, even if you're like me and you support our veterans 110%. Dennis in Bonner Springs, what's going on there, D?
Good morning, Pete. Hey, I enjoyed the interview this morning. I didn't get to listen to it Friday. The deal about the town hall out there, one of the people the local station interviewed, just to give you an example how far these people are going, he's a professor at KU.
Yes, you beat me you beat me on the story there, Dennis. I have it on the rundown. All right, let me hold on. I'm going to let you continue, I promise. I just don't want to confuse the audience here. Channel 9 interviewed somebody who was at the town hall, and this guy's name was Colin McDermott, and he is a professor at KU. Can you believe that? He is a professor at KU, and he was interviewed by Channel 9. Sorry, Colin McRoberts is his name.
Yep.
Colin McRoberts, KU professor, showed up in Oakley, Kansas on Saturday and is supposed to be the independent voice of the people of Kansas. Please.
Now, you covered this with your percentages. I tend to argue with you and Mark about Oakley, Kansas. I love Oakley, Kansas.
Wait.
Spent a lot of time there.
Who said they didn't love Oakley, Kansas?
Well, you guys kind of like your brother getting off, but staying there. There's if you're ever out there, seriously, this isn't a paid advertisement for the Chamber of Commerce. Go to the Fick Museum, all the stuff around. But what I'm going to say is, I've talked to so many people out there, and I was sitting there watching that, and I'm like, whoa, I've never talked to one person out there that's against what Trump is doing or against Trump. Where are they finding these people? And the other thing is all the things south of Oakley, out on the the High Plains to see. It's just take your family on a vacation. You won't be disappointed.
Hey, you keep going, Dennis. I'm going to have to bill Oakley's Chamber of Commerce for this spot.
I knew that was coming.
I'm just saying.
Hey, thanks, buddy. Bye.
Listen, I have spent many a night, many a time in towns just like Oakley, Kansas. I never got up as far north as Oakley when I was living in Woodward, Oklahoma, in northwest Oklahoma. I got as far north as Garden City and Dodge City. But going south from there, I spent a lot of time in Ashland and Liberal and out towards Meade, Kansas, and Coldwater Protection, calling football games, 8-man football games out there. That's a great part of the state. I don't deny that for a second. But no one's knocking Oakley. Mark, were you knocking Oakley? Let's be very clear here.
No.
Okay. I didn't think you were. I just want to make sure, because that is a fireable offense, to your point.
You are not guilty for your brother's sins.
No, yeah, exactly. I mean, I just said my brother-in-law drove in and stayed the night in Oakley, and when you've never spent a day in Kansas, or frankly, really any time in the heartland of the country, that's a new experience for a kid who is surfing in California.
There you go.
Most of the time. That's all I'm saying. Trust me, I'll take Oakley over wherever he's at in California every day of the week, twice on Sunday. Mike in Kansas City, what's up, Mike?
Okay, when Biden passes executive orders destroying the energy industry and also getting people fired for not taking the COVID vaccine, how many of those people that were fired, that were energy workers or people that didn't get the COVID vaccine, how many of those were veterans?
Yeah.
Let's talk about, we're sitting there cherry picking, who is more important to be fired from. But I agree with, what you and this other guy called before. This was a staged event. The People's Republic of Lawrence got in there and, they organized it, and they probably are people locally from the area, but they cherry picked people in there. They made it a media event. They, the cameras, the whole thing. And I hope that Trump and everyone else involved have a counter strategy to these. And I would love to see Marshall put a commercial on or something on there saying, oh, yeah, we had 75 people there. 74 of them were from Lawrence, and, there was one actually from Oakley or something like that. You got to fire this back at him.
Yeah, and I don't know if they have all that information. When Mark Alford dealt with this last week on the Missouri side, he did say that he thought most of the protesters were not from his district in Missouri's 4th Congressional District. But here's the thing. It's the optics that matter, right? This stuff spreads on social media. It gets written about in national and blogs, and then locally gets picked up by local news. And it's like, oh, man, wait, should I be turning on Doge if all these people in Oakley, Kansas are mad at Roger Marshall? It's all a propaganda tool is what it is. That's it. Now, if there's one thing that I'm looking at right now that I do think that Trump needs to recenter on and refocus on, I know that Doge over the long haul will help with inflation, right? If we reduce our government spending and we stop printing money and making the dollar less valuable every day, that will help with the inflation. It will help in the labor market. It will help in the consumer-driven market. It will be a good thing. But what is everybody talking about right now? What is the one thing that people are talking about when it comes to the price of, I'll give you a second, eggs? Everyone's talking, oh my gosh, egg prices. Kansas City Star has the lead story this morning. How much are eggs around Kansas City? Here are the prices at 8 grocery stores. It's amazing. I never recall the Kansas City Star writing about specifically the price of anything during Joe Biden's 4 years in the White House when inflation was hitting 40-year highs. But now the headline story today, the Kansas City Star is worried about the price of eggs. Now, as a big egg consumer, I'm also worried about the price of eggs. I also know this is not Trump's fault, and it's not Biden's fault. It's not. You've had an ongoing bird flu outbreak across the country. It's not the fault of Trump. It was not the fault of Biden. They've had to kill millions and millions of chickens. So what happens? The supply of those chickens that lay those eggs go down. The demand does not go down. The price goes up. That's how this works. That's economics. It's no one's fault. But what needs to happen now is Trump needs to at least bring the perception to the forefront that he is doing whatever is in his power to try to increase the supply of chickens. Now, that might sound ridiculous to you, but I actually think that that is something that at a time when people said, hey, I voted for this guy in large part because of the economy. Yes, all these other things are important, but the economy and the border and the immigration issues were the two main drivers. There has to be some kind of conversation or at least public awareness campaign that says we know this is a problem, and while the government can't fix the problem, here's what we can do at this point in time to try to expedite the solution to the problem. Because there are some people expecting the price of eggs to only go up as the year goes on. And you know and I know that at a time when everybody, uses eggs, we always have, we always will, it's a very quick way to potentially lose the narrative on being the guy who's going to get prices under control or will at least alleviate the speed at which the prices are increasing. So that's something that if I'm Trump, I'm bringing back, or really not even bringing back to the forefront, but putting at the forefront moving forward. Because it will at least make people feel like, hey, I'm aware of it. I'm on the ball. I want to fix it. All things that Joe Biden didn't do during his 4 years in office. He just whistled right past the graveyard. I want to take you back on a Monday morning to 2022 when the Biden administration found itself in a difficult spot with Vladimir Zelenskyy. They felt like they were supporting Ukraine with every last dollar that Zelenskyy was asking for. And then Biden said, hey, this guy's got to be a little more grateful. I will share an NBC News report in 2022 that reads as follows. It became routine since Russia had invaded Ukraine. Joe Biden and Zelenskyy speak by phone whenever the U.S. announces a new package of military assistance for Kiev. But a phone call between the two leaders in June played out differently from previous ones, according to 4 people familiar with the call. Biden had barely finished telling Zelenskyy he'd just greenlighted another $1 billion in U.S. military assistance for Ukraine when Zelenskyy started listing all the additional help he needed and wasn't getting. Joe Biden lost his temper. The American people were being quite generous, and his administration and the U.S. military were working hard to help Ukraine, he said, raising his voice, and Zelenskyy could show a little more gratitude. That's from NBC News. October of 2022. How is that any different from what happened in the White House on Friday afternoon? That now people are talking about as World War III is coming. No, it's not. No, it's not. I know this is all about your hatred for Trump. And, I suppose you're allowed to have that. But you want to talk about being hysterical over something that is not worthy of being hysterical over? It's what happened on Friday. That's all it is.
Now, you were asking about the difference. The difference would be this president spoke in complete sentences.
Come on, man.
And probably didn't say, listen, Jack, we're being good to you. Those
What are we talking about?
A couple of differences I would think of.
One or two. That's a good point.
Those would just be style points. Though.
I've seen a lot of memes of Zelensky sitting next to Trump, and over Zelensky's head is the phrase, "Hey, I'm looking for the old guy who was here last time I was at the White House." Where's that guy? Where's he? Oh, my gosh.
God save the Queen, man.
Yeah, no, he's long gone, sitting on the beaches in Delaware somewhere, I think. So this is not about like some unique situation. And I talked about this, and we've talked about it on this show for the last couple of weeks, that Biden's administration had some similar frustrations to now what Trump is airing. The difference is, of course, Trump airs it in a very Trumpian way. Like John notes, speaking in complete sentences is part one of that. Part two of that is he is not going to allow himself or the United States to be out-alphaed by a guy who could not have done any of what his country accomplished in holding off Russia without our help. It's not going to happen. And he's not going to allow it to happen. And good on him for that. But, of course, when you see some of the reaction here locally, and you see, it was just like every prominent Democrat, although I will say Sharice Davids didn't say anything on social media about this. You had a Ukrainian flag post on X from Mayor Lucas, whatever, very cliche, very expected. You had Emmanuel Cleaver, just totally off his rocker. And no, he didn't call Trump a musty moo moo moo. He didn't. He didn't do that. He said it was the most embarrassing and shameful moment he's ever witnessed in the Oval Office. I guess he forgets about Bill Clinton a little bit there. I don't know.
He didn't witness that.
Yeah. Not that we know of, at least.
Yeah, right.
I don't think that's Cleaver's style, but I can't say with any certainty it's not. But that kind of overreaction locally is what you would expect from people that have stage 5 Trump derangement syndrome, because that's all this was on Friday. A made-for-TV moment, and it sent the TDS folks just totally off the deep end, John.
Well, and sort of to Trump's point, Zelensky was trying to be a comedian, right? Do you see the part that some guy in royal blue suit says, "Hey, how come you didn't wear a suit today?"
Yes.
Zelensky's like, maybe next time I wear a suit, maybe more expensive than yours. I thought, whoa. But then he realized what he was doing. He's like, or maybe cost less. But I thought, okay, this is that comedian thing where he thinks he's in charge.
Right? Here's what I would say, though. If you think you're funny, and this is true for all of us, your sense of humor may not translate to another language in another country. You got to be very careful with that when it comes to a sense of humor, right? And that's where Zelensky, I think, overplayed his hand in a big way. He thought he was just going to show up and he was going to look like the hero in his little getup, and we were all going to be like, oh, man, Zelensky is here. We all love him. And I think we all appreciate what he has done, leading his country through wartime, holding off the Russians. It is admirable what the people of that nation have fought to do the last 3 years. But it comes a point when, especially we're the folks carrying the load here financially, you got to figure out what the end game is. And if you can't win this war, and it's pretty evident to a lot of people you can't, then what's the best deal you can come to? And the best deal Zelensky can come to is ending the war, probably not being thrilled with the terms, but neither is Putin, and then getting a huge amount of investment from the United States into that country. Our buddy Charlie Gasparino, Fox Business Network, he just put this up on X, and I shared it at Pete Mundo. He writes here, one of the problems with Donald Trump's people constantly calling Zelensky a dictator although Trump has rightly backed off that, Barb, is that he's not. He was elected president. He suspended elections because of the war. And he's popular at home. I know all of the above for a fact after getting to know Ukrainians and their soldiers, who are the best trained in Europe and will continue to fight. There's no popular uprising, trust me on this, and this is a strong country that loves America. Zelenskyy didn't comport himself well the other day, but it's time to make this happen, and Trump can do it. The business opportunities will be amazing for the U.S. and Ukraine. In a year, people will forget Putin even exists. And that's all Trump's trying to accomplish. Put Ukraine in a position where they've got so much investment coming from the U.S. companies and other companies around the world that naturally creates a barrier, and that naturally creates a Vladimir Putin who is going to back off and is not going to go back into Ukraine if the U.S. has investments there, because then suddenly, guess what? We've got to defend our investments and our people. And apparently Zelenskyy didn't understand that part of it, or didn't want to understand that part of it. And if you missed it, Marco Rubio on ABC this week, he was on with George Snuffleupagus yesterday. He was outstanding.
Shouldn't we all be happy that we have a president who's trying to stop wars and prevent them instead of start them? And I just don't get it. I really don't, other than the fact that it's Donald J. Trump. If this was a Democrat that was doing this, everyone would be saying, well, he's on his way to the Nobel Peace Prize. This is absurd. We are trying to end a war. You cannot end a war unless both sides come to the table, starting with the Russians. And that is the point the president has made. And we have to do whatever we can to try to bring them to the table to see if it's even possible. I'm not promising you it's possible. I'm not telling you it's 90% likely. I'm saying it's 0% likely if we don't get them to a negotiating table. And the sooner everyone grows up around here and figures out that this is a bad war that's heading in a bad direction with death and destruction and all kinds of dangers surrounding it that could spiral into a broader conflict, the sooner people grow up and realize that, I think the more progress we're going to be able to make. But the president's crystal clear. He campaigned on it, and he's going to govern on it. And that is, he is going to be a president that tries to achieve peace, and he has been very clear this is a war that would have never happened had Donald Trump been in the White House, and it needs to end, and we're going to do everything we can to end it in an enduring and sustainable and fair way.
Man, way to go, Marco.
Show some RESPICT.
A little respect for little Marco. That's right.
He went from little Marco to big bowls Marco.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I like that. That sounds good. Although Marco was getting made fun of over the weekend. Did you see that? Where he was kind of slouched in his seat next to J.D. Vance. And the insinuation was that Marco was like, oh, my gosh, this is going awful for Trump. I'm so embarrassed to be here. Marco lit it up on TV. And I don't think you could ever take a snapshot of somebody at a moment in time, a still photo, and be like, I definitely know what they're thinking in that moment. Come on. Marco, I think, was probably embarrassed for Zelenskyy as much as anybody else, because he's sitting there as the Secretary of State saying, we're trying to help this guy. We're trying to help this guy, and now he's making a fool of himself. And you know Trump was not going to let him off the hook at that point, right? You knew that wasn't going to happen. 913-408-7957, our studio line and our text line on KCMO Talk Radio. Pete, I love you, but you're naive if you think Putin will abide by any agreement. Okay, so then what's the answer? If we have American business investing in Ukraine to help rebuild it, and Putin breaks the agreement, he's going to have another thing coming. Ukraine doesn't have the manpower anymore to actually beat Russia in this war. They've got a fourth of the population. 1 million people have reportedly died between both sides. What are you going to do then? What's the answer? Just keep giving them endless amounts of money and hope this thing ends at some point? Don't we want to end war and not continue it unnecessarily? I'm not saying you trust Putin, but the greatest backstop you could have is American investment in Ukraine. And the rest of Europe as well stepping to the plate here a little bit. Wouldn't that be a novel concept as well?
Seems as if we're too far removed from Vietnam and just pumping money in there.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, people have forgotten.
Some, you're right.
Some never learned.
Some, ain't that the truth?
No, I mean youngers.
Yes. The
people
military
my age understand it.
Well, not everyone your age, John. I'm sure there's plenty of those people that don't understand either.
Well, you got that right.
You know, I mean, trust me.
Don't want to in that case.
They are driven by their TDS. I've saw a lot of it on social media over the weekend. I stand with Ukraine and their little new Facebook profile pictures. It's like, you know what? I'm going to share that with a little Blockbuster Video sign over it saying I stand with Blockbuster Video because the color's the same. That's what I'm going to do.
Well, it's this year's BLM thing.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Raise your flag and salute. Yep.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I know you're going to be shocked, absolutely shocked by the Kansas City Star's coverage of Trump and Zelenskyy. This will stun you.
Talk about a bombshell.
Said nobody ever. Just a reminder, no need to get the subscription. Just let me share it with you for humor's sake here on KCMO.
I'm not worth your Red Lobster money?
No, the Kansas City Star is not worth your Red Lobster money. I promise you that. All right? Definitely not.
I'm not worth your McDonald's money?
No, it's not worth your McDonald's money either, okay? Just sit back, and I will share the stories with you, and you can get a good laugh at their expense. Dion Leffler writing a piece here. Senator Roger Marshall, you're no Dwight Eisenhower, and neither is Donald Trump. This comes after Marshall had a town hall in Oakley over the weekend. I'll get to more of that coming up later in the hour. But it starts off writing here. Senator Roger Marshall talked about how inspired he is by Dwight Eisenhower several times during his town hall meeting in Oakley on Saturday. The article then goes on to say that Marshall spoke less than 24 hours after the surrender. Monkeys in the White House ambushed Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy. Oh, my gosh. It is a stain on the honor of America, writes Dion Leffler in the Kansas City Star, that will likely not wash away in our lifetimes. You have got to be kidding me.
Woo.
Oh.
There's something wrong with them.
You know, when they wrote that, they sat back and went, oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, I know.
They admire the work.
Yeah, their hands hurting from patting themselves on the back so hard.
Broken arm.
Yep. Adding here in the Star, in the most un-Eisenhower move ever, Marshall parroted the administration's line that Ukraine's courageous and world-inspiring resistance to Putin is a bottomless pit for the American taxpayers. And he blamed Friday's fiasco on Zelenskyy, who could barely get a word in edgewise while being berated by our beat red-faced president. Did any of these people actually watch this? It was a 50-minute sit-down that, yes, got tense towards the end. But it didn't just randomly get tense because of something Trump said. Trump was there with the cameras rolling, trying to be like, look at what we're about to do. We're going to sign this agreement, and we're going to save lives, and this is going to be great for everybody. And it's Zelenskyy who sent the thing off the tracks. But that's the Kansas City Star for you. So this notion that, oh, man, I mean, if only Ike was back in power, oh, we would be fine.
Do you see the irony here of these people that say they want to take us back?
I know.
Right? Here they're yearning for the days of old.
That's so true, man. It is. The Star and Dion Leffler adds, it's frankly sickening to hear Marshall imply that Eisenhower would have approved of any part of this. Contrast that with what Eisenhower said as he sent 160,000 Allied troops, 73,000 American sons, into the meat grinder of the D-Day invasion to free other people's countries from brutal dictatorship. Today, the hope and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with the soldiers of Ukraine. All right, Dion, I know you're an old guy. I can tell based on the look of your bio picture there on the Star's website. But you send your sons over to Ukraine if you feel that strongly about it. You're going to compare Ukraine today to Eisenhower and D-Day 80 years ago? Are you kidding me?
No kidding.
What a freaking joke this guy is. And you know what? Let's share a clip from Dwight Eisenhower. Can we do that here? I got it right in front of me. Okay? Ike may have been the guy that coined the phrase military-industrial complex. And this was in his farewell speech, where he may have been ahead of his time talking about endless wars for endless profits. War can be important. It can be valuable when needed. Republicans understand that. It was Reagan who, of course, had the peace through strength approach that worked out very well, too. But here's Dwight Eisenhower, farewell speech, talking about the military-industrial complex.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence
whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together.
So that security and liberty may prosper together. That's Dwight Eisenhower, going back 63 years ago, 64 years ago now, in his farewell address to the nation. I don't know which Dwight Eisenhower Dion Leffler or the Kansas City Star is referring to or thinking of, but not the same guy who gave that speech on his way out the door. And if you think the answer is, somehow having D-Day 2.0, you have got to be kidding yourself. Is this a shout-out for Zelenskyy? Should have been him, the little tiny dancer showing up at the White House. That's what he should have done. That's all it would have taken, all right? Show up there, do your little song and dance. You know what to do with Trump. It's not hard, right? I mean, anyone who's followed Trump for 7 minutes knows what you can do. You show up, you say, Mr. President, we couldn't do it without you. That's literally, that's all you do in front of the cameras. And you probably get what you want here.
I likened this to the Seahawks in the Super Bowl. They could have ran it with Marshawn Lynch at the goal line and passed it and threw an interception.
Oh, yes.
Hey, a simple, who's your barber?
Yeah.
Would that do, right?
Anything, man. We got a Trump statue coming to Ukraine once this war ends. Oh, man, thank you, Daddy. We so appreciate it. Anything for you. And then Trump would have been like, that Zelenskyy guy, I'll tell you, he's come a long way.
Such a nice man.
Oh, yes. Vladimir. I like you more than the other Vlad. You're my number one Vlad. That's all it would have taken, man. Jeff's in Shawnee. What's up, Jeff?
Hey, Jeff. This is a great show. Hey, all you people that are all bummed out about us not sending money to Ukraine, again, I've said this before, man. Prairie Village, Mission Hills with your Ukraine flags. Don't go on that trip to Hawaii. Don't buy you that brand new car this year. Send that money to Ukraine. I've yet to see anything on any of the liberal news stations that say, hey, let's start getting it like UNICEF and United Way. We're going to send them money, but it's going to be your money.
Yeah.
You're in the game, man. That's all I got to say, man. Take care.
Hey, thank you, Jeff. I think that's a great idea. UNICEF for Ukraine. I think that's a smart call. But listen, it's like all this stuff. It's always virtue signaling. That's all it is. I didn't drive through the neighborhoods that he referenced there on the call this weekend. I don't know if the Ukraine flags were flying high and proud. But here's the other part of this. Like, this doubling down on, oh my gosh, Trump had the audacity to do what? Oh my gosh, give Zelenskyy the blank check and whatever he wants. It doesn't cater to the people that the Democratic Party are hemorrhaging, which is working class, whites, blacks, Hispanics across the board. This is something that caters to the high-income, master's degree, Subaru driving liberal who watches MSNBC and is 62 years old. Like, that's who cares about this and is really offended by this. Not the regular working class stiff that continues to not recognize the Democratic Party that they probably grew up with and that their parents probably grew up with. It's just that same diehard base that they're frankly doubling down on. So this is not the big win that they think it is. It's not. Let's go to Frank in Platte City. What's up, Frank?
Yeah, I haven't heard. I'd like to hear a question to Zelenskyy. If he wants so much money, why doesn't he call the Biden family, ask them for the money back that he gave them, and how much money did he sock away from those billions of dollars? Now, I know they get the money partly in weapons, But there was money going across there, too.
Well,
and I'd like for Trump to back him in a corner somewhere and ask him the question, even if it's not on TV.
You know, Frank, that's chump change. That's chump change, brother. I appreciate it. And then, Biden's going to suddenly be like,
what are we talking about?
I don't have a clue. Ryan and Rosedale, real quick, buddy, what's happening?
Well, I was just, not that this would happen, but, the English and French are talking about they're going to put boots on the ground over there. And so you're going to have all these European snakes running around with boots on the ground. And then I'm kind of worried about some contrived incident where the one errant missile by Putin that hits Western or Eastern Poland or something, they're going to claim that he's attacked NATO territory, and they're going to call us in and want our military to go in there.
Here's what I would say to that, Ron. Just like on the left, don't create some cockamamie theory that's going to get you all bent out of shape. I would say the same thing on the other side. Let's just let this thing ride out for now. A deal I believe is going to get done. It's going to be all right. That was just a step in the negotiating process. And I guarantee you Trump over the weekend was probably saying to himself, man, that felt good to get off my chest. Right or wrong, as Rich Lowry said, maybe it was too much. But I think kind of like a fight with your spouse, usually it's pent up over a long period of time that leads to a blow up. And that's what that was for Trump. And maybe Zelenskyy, too. He might have been mad about how, Trump called him a dictator on social media. He might have been frustrated about, the vote with the UN and Russia. And for both sides, like many fights, right, with people that you care about, there's other things behind the scenes that lead up to that moment.